This is our first blind kitten that we fostered. Actually, I rescued this one and fostered her. So, of course, it ended up being a foster fail. We ended up keeping her because how could I acclimate a blind kitten to our house and then give her up for adoption and do that to her, make her relearn a new house and everything. Anyway, we ended up naming her Murdock. We thought she was a boy at first. So when we got this kitten, she was about 3 weeks old, 8.2 ounces, and I couldn't figure out how I should set up a safe place for her in the house, being completely blind. She also was anemic from an insane flea infestation, malnourished, although she didn't look like it because she does have such a fluffy coat, and very, very sick with an eye infection that had completely fused her eyes shut. So we thought when we cleared that up, she would have vision, but she did not. So 8.2 ounces, and we have a 160-pound Mastiff, 5 kids, a couple babies here, 2, a toddler running around, other litter of foster kittens, and our own 2 cats, 3 cats that we had at the time. So I didn't want a blind kitten to just get completely lost in the shuffle of all that. For the first time, I felt like my laundry room would be way too big and confusing. I don't normally like keeping them in crates or cages or kennels, but I had to figure out what to do to keep this little baby safe. So what I came up with, actually, after getting her warm and comfortable and happy, it was October and it was unusually cold. So when I rescued her, she was literally out in the icy rain in an alley and shivering. So first thing I always do is the flea baths, multiple baths until I get all the fleas off manually through combing and washing. And I got all the glued gunk out of her eyes, put her under the hot light with the little rabbit fur, and she was just in heaven. So while she was there getting warmed up and feeling safe and comfortable, I set up a bird cage. This is actually a bird cage. So the first things I started to sort of think through and intuit were she cannot see, and I want her to find her way around the cage quickly. I don't want her pooping and peeing where she should eat or sleep. So I need to go with textures, and everywhere she goes, she's gonna feel something that's gonna give her input that this is a, such and such location. So this is how I set up her food and water. It had been a cage actually for reptiles that we had. So once I sanitized it, and they were never sick anyway, but still, once I sanitized it, I chose to leave in the fake leaves and I intentionally bent them so they were sort of over her food area, so that every time she went to go seek her food out by smell, she would feel those leaves. And when she felt the rustling of the leaves and brushed against the leaves, she would know that her food should be right around those leaves. And that way also, if I ever had the dishes out and I was cleaning them or something, she wouldn't become disoriented and say, I don't know where my food is supposed to be. She would say, oh, I felt and heard those leaves. My food normally should be there. If I wait right around that corner, that's probably where it's going to come back. And I also was very careful to give her a completely separate dimension and height of water dish. And I still do that for her to this day, so that her whiskers will brush around and tell her immediately, oh, this is a solid higher thing over here. That's water. And she can confidently go right up to that and immediately dip her face at the right spot and know the height. That's where my water is. It's higher than my food, so that it just, she didn't have to feel her way around at all. And she always knows her water dish is higher than her food dish, just to differentiate the two. That's what I started doing when she was that young. So one other thing that I started doing with her was, normally I figured when she got older, I'd do the same thing for her that I do for all my other kitties. I just call them to the meal, kitty, 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 and the kissy noise, and they all come running. The fact that I had so many cats while I had her, I didn't want to do that call to feed her, because all my other cats would come running and that might overwhelm her or scare her. So I started doing this. I kept a crackly in her cage, and I would crackle it to call her to her food. So every time I fed her, at first she didn't get it at all. She didn't associate it. So I'd crackle, 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 and then I'd start putting my other hand in there and put her in front of the food. And pretty soon she did associate that crackling with feeding time. And then every time I crackled, she'd come running and eat. So I did get her trained to that sound. Now that she's fully grown and very comfortable in our house, I don't have to do that anymore. I just do the kitty kitty thing, and she comes running and all the other cats come running. But when she was this tiny, I didn't want to overwhelm her and scare her. So she had her own noise for coming, and it didn't attract the other cats. So this is another view of the bird cage. I kept her bed pretty darn close to her feeding area, and those are the leaves over there, and they don't look like it in this picture, but they're only over the feeding area. And I gave her, instead of just a flat spot on the floor, a little round cushiony bed with the rabbit skins in it. And I sort of used the skins to show this, wherever you feel those nice soft furry skins, that's where you sleep and play. But I didn't want the skins around where she eats or goes potty. So in this picture, I did have it pushed over there for some reason, but she loved to roll and play and snuggle on the rabbit skins. And see, that one is on her bed. So she got the picture pretty quickly. I don't think she ever had a mess or accident on the rabbit furs. She realized this is where I play, not where I go potty. It really helped with litter training to give such a different texture to the areas where she should not go potty. Doesn't she look like a little polar bear? Little black toes, and she was just so roly-poly. She gained weight really quickly. And she was suckle obsessed, which was interesting because she would not take a bottle. She was only 3 weeks, but she came from a feral colony. So her mother had died pretty early on, and neighbors who live adjacent to that alley had been feeding canned food to all her litter for since they were born, I think. So she had no concept of even how to suck on the bottle. She ate really well, solids. So, but she did suck on the fur and suck on everything like crazy. So this is Douglas. He's in another one of my videos. He is my pacifier invention. I wrap a rabbit fur around him. I poke some holes in it. And you can't see them here because when I only have a singleton, I just keep in one row of bottle nipples. So they're all where her head is. But I believe there's a row of 3 different nipples, and then she could pick the one she liked, and she would suck on them for a pacifier. So it's also just a mother replacement object, because as a singleton, it's so nice for them if they can have something or someone else to snuggle with and play with and lay on. And I didn't see it in the pictures yet, but I always use my hot lights for the kitties I foster and my own kitties. So there is a hot light up there above her bed, and it keeps the comfort object nice and warm all the time too. So that fur warms up really well and just kind of feels like a mama replacement for them. So this is another view of the cage. I used one of my homemade covered litter boxes there. I had to get a very small one that fit in the cage for her, but it took up that whole side of the cage, which was perfect because a blind kitten this tiny, to learn their area, should not have a very big area. And the smaller their area is, the quicker they learn it. So I don't think she ever had an accident outside the box because luckily it took up that much space. And when she got bigger, she could jump up and down off of the top of the box. That became another play area for her. Oh, and in this picture you can see the hot light up there too. Got it at a nice safe distance above her, but it still kept everything really warm. As she got more comfortable and played more, I also saw ways to add in more things to show her, remind her what area of the cage this is. So I took, I think it was like a chopstick, put it between the bars diagonally, and I hung that little mousy toy from it. And I hung it over her bed. She loved to play with him. She didn't have any litter mates to play and wrestle with. And if I was ever cleaning the cage and had removed all the bedding and the fur, it would tell her what part of the cage she was in. If her food dish was gone and she couldn't tell where she was in the cage, and maybe she was gonna have an accident because we did deworm her, and you know what happens then. well, if she wasn't sure which way is my litter box, she would bump into that little dangling mousie and say, oh, that's my bed, so my litter box should be that way. Or she would hit the leaves and say, that's where my food should be, litter box is that way. So this is the whole cage, the whole bird cage. I could keep all her supplies underneath and on top of it. And it was a waste of space. Vertically, she certainly didn't need all that space up there, but it was just what I had on hand at the time. It worked great for her. I think she stayed in it until she was almost 2 pounds, or about, I think, 10 weeks to 11 weeks. I kept her in there and she kept using it. Once she started chewing on the little wood pieces and trying to climb them, that's when I said, okay, I think she's big enough for the laundry room now. It kept the other cats from frightening her and overwhelming her, kept her nice and safe, made a great place to hang the hot light so she could have that all to herself. So that is what I did to foster a teeny tiny blind kitten and start training her and teaching her about the different things she needs to utilize, like food and water, litter box, snuggle area. So she had a nice safe place to start learning all those things. And then when she got out of the cage, I still did them in the area she stayed in. When she was in my laundry room, I'd still go in there and crackle the crackly when I was bringing her fresh canned food. And I had a hot light over a basket for her, and we still used the little fur skins for where we wanted her to sleep. And I would still find ways to hang up rustly things here, to tell her that's where I'm always going to put your food. So that's the whole cage set up there. And one other thing I learned with her, coming from the feral colony, she was not wild, like attack you or hiss or scratch and bite, but she was very fearful. So at first she would just curl herself into a tiny, tiny ball, hunker down, and not make any noise. And she didn't know if you could see her or not, so she would think she was hiding somewhere. And even if you could see her, she would just sit there and not move a muscle, not respond to being called, not meow, even if she was scared or cold or something brand new, a new noise would scare her to death. And the dog really scared her at first too, so she would just sit there and huddle up and stay as still as she could. And if she was somewhere where I could not find her or see her, I couldn't hear her. My other cats would usually make noise or come when called, but she was feral enough that even the crackly wouldn't bring her if she had gotten scared. So I would just have to make everything dead quiet, tell all my kids to be quiet, and really sit and try to listen for her and hope she would cry or meow. So I learned very quickly, I am not going to ever find this one. So that's part of why I decided to go with the bird cage, and I'm glad I did. But I also learned I have to be able to hear her. I have got to hear her moving around in the house in case she's headed for somewhere she shouldn't be. And I put bells on all my cats. And the bells I use are kind of loud. I also learned if there's a consistent noise going on, she can't hear very well, and she'll get really disoriented when her hearing is interrupted by another noise. Like if I run the sink water and she was playing with a toy and someone was rolling a ball for her, but now there's a sink running in the same room, she will just dead stop and not make a move because she can't hear that ball anymore and she's confused about what to do. So that told me I need to have bells on her for sure, but I need them not to be very loud so she can't still hear everything around her. And also they can't sound like the other cat's bells because that really confused her. So I made this out of some little like India belly dancer bells. They're not loud at all. They have a soft tinkle and a soft jingle. So even when she's hiding, there's enough of them that if everything is really quiet and she has to shift a little bit because she's been there for a long time, I can hear her and find her, and I know it's her and not anyone else because the sound is so different. And it's also quiet enough that it doesn't ever stop her. If she's running or playing or really focused on tracking down one of the other cats, and they start to tinkle as she's going down the stairs, and they make their little noise. It doesn't stop her at all. She doesn't even slow down. It's not too loud. It's not a jarring sound. So those are some of the tips I learned with a brand new teeny tiny blind foster kitten. Hopefully they help somebody else out too.